welcome to Unapologetically Technical. My name is Jesse Anderson, and this is the show that's different. We go deep. We go all the way down. We go deep into the technical details. With me today is Michael Drogalis. He is the founder and CEO of ShadowTraffic. Welcome to the show, Michael. Would you mind introducing yourself a bit more?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jesse. So my name is Michael. By background, I'm a software engineer. I've spent the majority of my career focused on distributed systems and event streaming. By trade, I've become an entrepreneur. I've worked at various companies of different sizes, but kind of the highlights have been starting an early stage company named Distributed Masonry, which I eventually sold to Confluent. I worked there for a number of years and recently left to start another company, which is ShadowTraffic. And the kind of the focus of my career has been, this early stage thing. How do you make something out of nothing, particularly in the domain of infrastructure and for the most part streaming?
Oh, that's interesting. I've seen this common thread within Confluent people that we'll have to talk about that more because I've interviewed several people who are former Confluent. And so, yeah, we'll talk about that more. But to start off with, tell me, why are you so interested in real-time data and real-time infrastructure, as you said?
When I got out of college, I was kind of trying to figure out what was the area that I really wanted to focus in and specialize in. And maybe two things were really apparent to me as I was leaving school. Number one, open source seemed to be quite important. It seemed like everyone who had a successful career and who had built a following was either a founder or like a key member of an open source project. And so my eyes were really on that space. And around that time, it was about 2012, 2013. Hadoop was very popular. Kafka was just becoming popular. Storm was becoming popular. I took a job at a data analytics company. And so all those technologies were really relevant. And with that being my focus, kind of the other thing that was apparent to me was that everyone was really complaining about how slow Hadoop was. And there was obviously this problem to be solved. And so me, this, relatively young person in my, early mid 20s, I was sort of looking at, well, you could either like look at these technologies that are taking like 6 hours to do a batch processing workload, or you can look at this cool Storm thing that does things in real time. And it was just really obvious to me that area was the future. I mean, no one was ever going to want to go slower. People were only ever going to want to go faster. And so there was all this momentum behind event streaming. It was very exciting. All these people were new. All these ideas were incredibly new. There were these papers coming out, and it was just fun as someone who was kind of new to the domain because no one had this all figured out by any means. And so there was really a means to participate, and there was clearly a lot of business value to be had.
Yeah, you're definitely right. That time, that 2012 time, that was a really interesting time because that was when I saw that need for Kafka as well. There was a very clear, here is a value prop for it that Hadoop couldn't do. It was just people were trying to do it. I don't know if you remember back in the day, people would try to create these small files and do these very small batches and didn't work at all. They were just trying to do a workaround, and Kafka filled that need well.
Yeah, and there were a lot of projects taking off at the same time. It was sort of like when JavaScript was kind of going through this kind of rehash phase, like React eventually won. But there were all these frameworks coming up, and it was fun to see all those ideas being tried. And it wasn't clear what was going to be best or what was going to win, but it was just like a good time to be around all that.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. So you mentioned kind of moving around between various software shops and out of school. One of the, I guess, a notable one would be Oracle. It looked like that you started right out of school. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was my first job. I remember walking in, looking at the office, and seeing all these people at their desks working diligently on code, and it was just like, to me, someone who like really liked software engineering, it was like looking at like a professional baseball team for the first time. And in retrospect, it was just a job. It was a good set of people and it was fun, but it like meant so much to me. But yeah, that was kind of my first job watching people professionally build software, and I guess I just kind of had the bug ever since. I thought it was just really cool.
It is. What made you choose Oracle at that point?
It was my first job, so it was just sort of like good proximity to family, interesting work. I think I had some friends there at the time, so it wasn't really a deliberate choice so much as oh, I'm glad my degree has paid off in some means. And so it was a good start to my career.
Okay, that makes sense. And you said you did some analytics companies. You were doing real time with them, or you doing batch with those companies?
It was batch. So I went to college in Rochester, New York, and then most of my family lived in Pennsylvania at the time. And so I wanted to be, sort of near them. I moved to Philadelphia, which is where my brother was living, and I had done an internship for this company. Um, and yeah, it was this very early stage startup. It was like Series A. There was maybe 10 people, 15 people when I had initially joined. And yeah, it was like right at this crux where, like, exactly what you were saying. People were trying to figure out, well, how do we make Hadoop go faster? And everyone was sort of like tweaking knobs and trying these different strategies. And there was some experimentation with Kafka and Storm, but mostly it was really trying to push the bounds of Hadoop. And that was really like what led me to sort of have the springboard into event streaming. It was clear that it was valuable. I got to see it in a professional environment. I got to see it's highly paid people trying to make Hadoop go faster. And I was like, oh, surely there's going to be something here if I, invest my mind into this area of computing.
One of the things I noticed looking through the amount of time you had at each one of those companies, you weren't spending a lot of time at each one. Did that give you a different perspective going through that many different companies early on?
I think so. I maybe I don't know how unusual this is these days. 10 years at companies certainly tend to be shorter. But yeah, I mean, I did that startup for a little while. I realized I really wanted to do closure, and so that quickly brought me into the functional programming crowd. Um, Closure wasn't and still isn't super popular, and so I took the next job where I was able to get it, which was at a very large company called Viasat. And so I went from like Series A to public company, and I did some independent consulting in the middle. And so I saw a lot of different things. Yeah, it'd be naive of me to say like I absorbed it all over the course of a 4 year period. You really can't do that. But I at least got to see different company cultures and see how they operate and how they value. And yeah, maybe it would be ideal to spend a longer time at a single place when you just come out of school. But for me, it just happened to work well to sort of see what I like. And kind of as I said earlier, I just realized I just like this early thing. I like all the uncertainty. I like having to do many different things all at once and figure it out. And so it was a positive experience for me.
One of the things you did, you were talking about moving, you went to Rochester, then you moved to Philadelphia, and then on to Seattle. Did you see any difference in the companies that, as you worked at them?
I'd say there was, certainly this interesting locale thing in Philadelphia where a lot of companies were sort of trying to focus on data infrastructure. And it's funny because you don't think of Philadelphia as like a tech hub, but there was this cluster of companies that were really focused on the same thing around data processing and analytics. And so it was like cool to be a part of that at the time because Philadelphia is not as big of a city in terms of professional footprint as the Bay Area and Seattle. And so it was kind of fun to be a part of that for the same reason that open source was fun. It was like sort of a confined area to participate in. It felt like I had a voice for the time that I was there. I made friends. But coming out to Seattle, I mean, I've been a remote worker for 8, 9, 10 years now, and so the region hasn't mattered. But certainly, like going to in person events, you see the scope of interest become so much larger when you're either in the Bay or Seattle, and that has a lot of positives too.
Okay, that's interesting. So even though you were at one of the tech hubs, you were still working remotely. It didn't really matter.
Yeah, it was just something that I learned that I liked again early in life. Is I work really well in a room alone. I like talking to people, obviously, but I'm just hyper productive when I'm not around other people physically, and it's worked well for me so far.
I told people when COVID hit that I was in training for COVID for the past 6 years before that.
But that sounds exactly right. There was a set of us who were ready to go. Nothing had really changed from a professional sense, even if the personal sense was all different.
Yeah. So let's talk about distributed masonry. What did this distributed masonry do?
We did a whole bunch of different things, and for the most part, it didn't add up to anything. So this was the case of, I had worked at that analytics company. I knew event streaming was going to be interesting. I ended up starting a open source stream processor called Onyx, which was primarily for the Clojure ecosystem. I just thought it was fun, and so I spent a bunch of time working on it. I grew the community pretty well within the Clojure ecosystem. It never broke out because I never really had the foresight that that would be an important thing to do. But we grew the community, did a bunch of consulting around it, which was it was fun to make my first dollar. on knowledge that was kind of my own, like this abstraction that I invented. People were paying me to help them with it. I thought that was cool. I eventually, got a co-founder, Lucas Bradstreet, um, who's currently at Confluent working on the Kafka storage team. But he and I had, we raised money from an investor, and we didn't really know what we wanted to do with it. We thought, all right, well, we're going pretty well here. We might as well keep rolling. And so the first thought was like, okay, maybe build a company on top of Onyx. That doesn't seem very good. Onyx wasn't really architected to break out into the masses, and so what else could we do with this? We tried to use it as an implementation for a function as a service platform. We built it. We didn't really ever find whether anybody wanted it or not. So we built it, and then we found nobody wanted it, which is just like classic early mistake. As our money began to dwindle, we pitched that idea. We tried a bunch of other things, and we eventually, kind of through luck, and I mean also through intuition of just trying for a couple of years, we realized there was this actually very focused problem out there, which was that companies were using Kafka, and Kafka was only designed to work with hard disks on the brokers. And eventually, you want to put a lot of data into Kafka, and you either need really big disks or you just can't hold that much data. And so we thought it would be really cool if we married up S3 and Kafka. And so, as far as I know, we were the first team to ever try to do tiered storage for Kafka. And we built a version of that. We got a couple customers, and we just decided, like, oh my God, we've been going at this for so long. We're exhausted. Confluent wanted to acquire us, and we thought that's a no-brainer. So we joined, and that kind of became the basis for all the activity you see in the Kafka storage world.
Hey, congratulations on that. Sometimes when you're doing that your first time, you're thinking, oh, this is just how every company early stage it happens, and yeah, that's great that you were able to do that. So
Thank you.
when you were thinking about founding this company, was it just a or clear path? Were your parents entrepreneurs? It sounds like you have a real entrepreneurial streak about you.
Yeah, not at all. My mom was incredibly worried about me, and has always been worried about what I'm doing, particularly when I was young. I didn't have a lot of money saved up. I mean, I had enough. I was a bachelor at the time, and so my living expenses were very low. Um, but yeah, no, there was no clear path. I mean, it was just sort of like I felt like my career was moving in the right direction, even though money wasn't really coming in. I was gaining popularity. I was gaining knowledge. It seemed like I was gaining some respect from people. And so, like, even if the money wasn't really showing up, I felt like, all right, this is a good thing. And when somebody came knocking that, they wanted to give us a whole bunch of money to try to do a company, it didn't really matter that we didn't have that part figured out yet. It was just like, okay, this is the next step. And um, it sounds just completely crazy now that I'm in my 30s, but in my 20s, it was just like, okay, this is great. And yeah, it was really hard. Mostly it was very fun, but there were some very hard challenges about it. And I'm glad that I did it. But like I said, we kind of stumbled into a good solution in the end. And it was a balance of luck and just intuition, having tried at it for a really long time.
What do you think the benefit of youth was in this?
Keeping my living expenses down. I mean, I have two children now, and anyone with kids just knows that your costs skyrocket once you have kids. Um, I I live in a more expensive area of the country now. Seattle wages are higher, but cost of living is higher as well. And so it's really just I've gotten on with maybe the latter years of my life, and yeah, when you're younger, you can just take these higher risks, and I've always been a fan of that. I don't know if I really registered that when I was in my teens, but I kind of realized in my 20s, this is a great time to just gamble. And as long as I was doing it intelligently, I wasn't doing anything dumb. I just felt like, all right, what's the next best thing I can do with myself to have a good long term career? Um, yeah, it's just the way I approached it.
That's a good way of approaching it. And but you were saying that you weren't specifically either coached or in your background that this was something that your parents pushed for. Was there other sorts of not risky behavior, but things that helped you feel comfortable with risk that you did early on?
I picked up a book when I had just finished college by the author Robert Greene. I think the title was Mastery, and he's a pretty popular author about kind of dynamics of human psychology and power and building a professional career. And Mastery is all about how you become kind of the heights in what you do. How do you become the grandmaster in chess? How do you become the Steve Jobs of products? And I'm nothing like that. But I really liked what he was saying about like, you got to spend your 20s and the early parts of your career learning as much as possible, trading short-term rewards, money for more power, more responsibility, just more experience. And I don't know. I think I picked that book up at the right time and I just absorbed it. I was like, I want to do everything I can to be as good as possible at this. I want to be kind of the best early stage entrepreneur I can. And maybe, combining that with what I was seeing in the closure ecosystem, it was a set of very open-minded individuals who were kind of willing to like risk their technology portfolio on something that seemed really, really great and still does. It was this really, I think it was a brave trade for a lot of people to make, that they were going to sort of invest into all these new ideas. And I just sort of had the right composition of people around me, I guess, all at the right time to do it.
It sounds like it. Sounds like you had a lot of support, and that's always helpful. So if anybody's as anybody's thinking about starting a business, the one of the best things you can do is get support in various ways, whether it's mentors or people that just cheer you on when things get low, pointedly.
Absolutely. It sounds like you probably had those in your life if you're commenting on the same, because that rings absolutely true to me.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I've started my business and I've been at early startups, so I know the ups and downs. And I would say in many ways my thinking mirrors yours. Of being at a really big company tends to be kind of boring. In fact, I was thinking about this the other day. At a big company, you have this slot that you fill into, and if you don't fill into that slot, and or you kind of go over that, people don't know what to do. There's just this uh, Michael does not fit into this nice little peg and this nice little thing that I expect him to do, or his role is outside of this remit that we put up on the website. And so in your early stage or you're used to doing entrepreneurship, you're comfortable in that. That's what you seek out.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not that it's bad that the big companies operate that way. It's just sort of like, it's so complex that you kind of need that level of orchestration to build a very, very big thing. But I guess for people like you and me, that's just a little bit unacceptable.
Yeah. Yeah, too many rules, too much process, too much. We had it at Cloudera. I got to see the growth at Cloudera of from the early startup to growing to to a pretty big behemoth. And yeah, necessary changes, but they weren't as fun changes as it were. Only
Yeah.
stock price changes were fun at that point.
There's a comment in one of Jeff Bezos's earnings, or one of his annual letters to shareholders, which are very popular. I recommend everybody read them because there's lots of business lessons in them. But one of them, he was sort of talking about the value of having a very large company, and he was saying that like small companies in a garage are great. Keep in mind they'll never build like the Boeing 737, which I realize is a bad example, but I think that's exactly what he said. And I think it's important to keep both in mind. Like I'm on here and you're here sort of hypering about how like early stage is fantastic. And for people like you and me, it fits. We also need the people at the bigger companies to do these very large, projects that really just fundamentally change the way people live. And so, whatever your calling is, I think it's good. You just sort of have to know what it is that you like so that you can be happy and productive over time.
So speaking of that, you've Confluent obviously bought your company. How do you think that acquisition went? Sometimes
I
there's some
think,
growing pains there.
yeah, I think great. I mean, it was sort of like a polishing school for me. It's funny. I was very naive in retrospect, where when they acquired us, I was like, great, I've learned everything there is about how to run an early stage company, and that is not true at all. It's like we joined, and there were maybe like 200 people there at the time, and so it was bigger than I was used to with our little gang of four that we had been running with for a while. And so I immediately saw some new things that I didn't know. I had a lot of fun through the early years because 200 is a lot closer to four than say 3,000. And so, yeah, it was a good acquisition. I realized at the time when they acquired us that I sort of had this choice. I could either go to engineering and continue to work on the tiered storage function, or I could retain this entrepreneur thing that I've been doing and become a product manager. I didn't even know what a product manager was. I actually asked them. I was like, I really liked running my company. Is there anything that's like that here? And they were like, well, there's this function called product. And I was like, oh. So yeah, it went well. I mostly did product while I was at Confluent. I got to see the company grow from 200 to something like 3,000 or something like that. And it hit a point where I realized, okay, this isn't for me anymore. Just because of the company size. Confluent didn't do anything wrong, but companies change as they grow. And it was good to see the whole thing because I think it's important to find your limit with these things and to realize what exactly was it that made you kind of like, I don't want to do that anymore. And for me, it was a function of company size.
Interesting. There's a theory on doubling that every time the company doubles, it changes dramatically. So that 200 to 400, that's a pretty significant change. Okay, that's an interesting reason. I think I don't think anybody said that as clearly of as you double, that was when you decided to leave. So
Have
that
you,
go ahead.
you've been through in companies of various sizes. Did you feel like there was a particular limit for you where it was like, okay, this is roughly my threshold where any bigger and I don't feel like I belong anymore?
Uh, it was when they started doing Concur for our expenses and travel. That
Yeah,
was when it was, oh wow, this really sucks. They've now made it much more difficult for me to do my job because I have to do all this stupid stuff in Concur. I can understand some of the reason for it, but the you can see the overhead growing and growing and growing, where
yeah,
it's going to take me. I'm going to have less and less time to do my job or to do what I love more correctly. So it was around that time. In fact, there was a story I'll tell quickly. That is, there was this thing field that said anytime you put in something, you had to put the business reason for it. So I was for my dinner, I put chemical energy so I don't die, and and they did not like that. But at the same time, it was my way of saying, why do you need a business reason for a meal? Like
yeah, yeah,
I needed to eat. Like everything on here. I can see why you might need it for, okay, you tipped somebody or you went to golf with somebody. Yeah, I can understand
yeah,
put a business reason there, but saying you had to have it for everything.
yeah.
So,
I
uh
think you point out something really really good there, which is that it may not be a size thing that affects everyone. Where it's like, okay, if there's 1,000 people, maybe that does or does not bother you, but it could be a trust thing over time, where different functions kind of have to inspect on other departments, and maybe that can bother you, or like you said, the overhead can grow. And yeah, some of those are needed. Some of them are a little insane, like that particular story. But it could be different reasons that get you. And I think this is part of just like knowing yourself. Like what do you like and why? And the more you can zero in on that, I think the happier you can be in your career.
and so you talked about that transition from being a CEO of your own company to being in product. Did you enjoy that transition? Was that the right path for you?
I think so. Yeah, I think if I had gone back to engineering, I would have kind of given up on all of this momentum that I had built around figuring out what problems people have. How do you communicate them in an interesting way? How do you grow the community around that? I loved all that, and I still love software engineering. I'm doing my own solo company and doing coding, so obviously it's a lot of fun. But it was definitely the right move for me at a company where I couldn't otherwise kind of do whatever I wanted. And like I said, I got a lot of exposure about how that particular job changes as the company grows. And yeah, product can really go from one person trying to get a little project off the ground to someone managing many people and many customers. And so it gave me a lot of empathy for um, what life is like for people at larger companies and timelines and things like that.
What would you recommend software engineers who want to get into product? What do you think they should do?
I would recommend to do it if you're interested in it, because I often get messages from software engineers who are worried that they're going to kind of leave their technical skills behind if they take a year or two in product. So if it's something that sounds interesting, do it because it's a lot of fun. At worst, you're going to grow your perspective about how to be a better engineer, and that's not bad at all. But I would say probably the most tactical thing you do is to get into more conversations with customers. Kind of ask your product your adjacent product manager, if you can just join the call, even as someone who's just listening, to just watch the dynamic between a good product manager and a customer, it's almost this this art form sometimes where like the role of product is to figure out where is the pain that customers are feeling. That's almost the majority of the game. And someone who can kind of have that conversation, artfully and kind of draw that out. It's a very good thing to observe firsthand. So I'd say that that's one thing. And another is to just to study and read. I mean, I think it's kind of undervalued. Everyone's kind of all in on experience these days, and experience is very important. But you won't be the first person to have gone from technical role to product. So you can always do some reading and some research about what that means and why what's important there.
So you talked about enhancing your perspective. What would what's an example, or what's a story that maybe you even reflect on now of, oh wow, that changed my perspective on how I write my code now?
Yeah, maybe here's a good one. When you decide kind of what's important, when the beginning, it's sort of this like internal sense of like, well, your view on the world. What do you? This is what I think we should build because that's kind of what I feel. Um, as you kind of graduate towards maturity on this, maybe the next rung on the ladder is that you just talk to customers and you kind of pitch your product, and if it resonates, you kind of build for whatever it is that they seem to be interested in. So if you talk to a lot of people and you see a lot of nodding heads, maybe that's the way that you should stack rank your backlog. The kind of the next level above that is sort of what I was saying. The thing you want to do is flip it. You don't want to pitch your customers the product and see whether they nod. You want to draw out their pain. You actually want to get it in their own words. And good product managers who can do that, that's how you really start to stack rank your backlog. It's really based on the prioritization of what your customers are saying and what hurts for them. Because you can pitch all you want, but the way that companies really make decisions is how bad does their own stuff hurt, and you really have to gain access to that and understand it. And the software engineers who understand that, I mean, they get along with product managers easier. The product managers get along with them easier. Everyone's more motivated because you understand the reason you're doing things. And so I think that's an example of how you can really grow your perspective and really increase the productivity of your engineering team, because you'll all be on the same page about why you're doing what you're doing.
Oh, good. And so, did you lose your programming ability? You said you're back to it after looked like a 5-year stint of not doing heads down.
I had various cold periods, I would say. Yeah, I probably didn't code from like 2018 to 2020. COVID hit, and I needed something to do like everyone else who was in lockdown. And so I did some various side projects, some JavaScript thing, and I felt kind of the calcification of my fingers. Like I forgot the bindings and Emacs, and it all came back after like a couple weeks or a month or two, and I was very happy. And then yeah, COVID sort of came and went and came and went. I think I did like another side project in like 2022 or something like that. And again, it sort of had like kind of gone to sleep for a little bit, and then it came back. And then by the time I decided to do my company again, I did like a little bit of a warm up. I had just been tinkering on some stuff to make sure that my brain was in the right space. But you know, 2 weeks in, 3 weeks in, I was back to normal. Partly because the pressure was so high. I didn't want to make a fool of myself that, I said I could be a solo founder and I dropped the technical side. But it was kind of like riding a bike. I mean, I've been in the same tech stack for a long time. And so it was just sort of like had that muscle memory built up. So yeah, it came back to me. If anyone's wondering whether you can really lose these things or not, I think it would have to be a really long time before really have lost a step.
Okay. Yeah, that resonates with the my experience and what I've seen for other people. So people who are watching this, your tech skills don't go away. Probably the biggest thing is that there's some movement that's happened that you'll have to catch up on. Containers, for example. If you haven't used containers, it's not this, oh my goodness, this is so much different. It's much more of, here's a different way of thinking about it. But the code, the frameworks, they're growing kind of linearly. They're not there's not this huge step in between in my experience.
That's a great example. And like things that have kind of outgrown me since I've come back would be like WASM. I don't know anything about WASM. People talk about it sometimes. Rust. Unclear whether I should be building my thing in Rust. Maybe, maybe not. But it's ahead of me, and eventually I should kind of close down that gap. But they're not existential. I'm still succeeding despite not knowing kind of the latest cutting edge stuff. And so, yeah, you're right. You want to close those things down eventually, but the priority is obviously to create business value, not to like learn the latest framework.
And that is spoken like a true entrepreneur slash product person versus an engineer. And so people watching this, this is what happens. Instead of this paralysis early on of, oh, I'm going to spend a month very clearly delineating which framework to use and which programming language to use, that some of this is starting to put some code down and starting to get that in front of customers is more important. There's obviously a difference here, or there's a trade-off here of write crap code, you'll have to rewrite it. But at the same time, don't spend forever in this analysis of trying to figure out what you want to do. Get this in front of customers so they can get that nodding head as you were talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, my instincts compared to my last company are completely backwards. Before, if I didn't have this like long block of hours where I can code, I felt very nervous. I was like, I won't be able to advance the product. My ideas aren't going to really come out. Now, if I look at my calendar and I have a blank day or a blank week, I actually get very nervous. I feel this sense of anxiety through the day that if I'm not talking to my customers, I'm going to fail. And I think that's partly driven by having essentially actually failed on many other products that didn't have product market fit. It's very painful to get to the end of a project and you realized I put in all this work and nobody cared. And I think that's probably the worst feeling ever for an engineer because you want your hard work to pay off. You want people to love your ideas. And I think once you felt that pain before, you swing in the completely different direction that you really want to prioritize getting in front of people and making sure that your stuff is actually going to land when you ship it.
That's a super good point, and I don't think engineers realize this. I think that there's not a misunderstanding in engineering about the value of sales and marketing or pitching or product, depending on where you put product in there. And it's the rare it's the rare product that can survive on its own technically, quite honestly. There almost always has to be some level of marketing, some level of pitching, some level of product fit. Otherwise, you're going to create something that nobody ever sees, which may be fine. If you're doing a personal project, that's different. But if you're trying to get something that somebody uses, that's a whole different story. And this is one of the lessons I needed to learn early on, frankly.
Yeah, absolutely. I think everyone needs to go through this. You know, it feels enough to have coded in the beginning, to have shipped something, and then whatever happens is sort of far away from you. These other people in sales and marketing, I don't know about them. I don't see them. I don't even see the customers. I just shipped it. That's enough. And then as you kind of progress through your career, you sort of peek over the fence and you see what's going on, and you see the usage metrics are maybe not very good, or the sales are not very good, and every I think accomplished intellectual person wants their ideas to really have meaning in the world, and it would be a tragedy not to achieve that. And so that's probably why everybody kind of goes through this phase, I guess.
Yeah, I would say at its core as an engineer, you want your products to be used. And if you don't go through this, your products probably won't be used. So it's an important growth part. So let's talk about your new venture, ShadowTraffic. We will go to the whiteboard now. And would you mind drawing out what ShadowTraffic is?
Yeah, so ShadowTraffic solves what I call the $10,000 demo problem. I kind of always try to start with, what's the problem that we're trying to solve. Throughout my career in streaming, as we've talked about, I realized there was this problem where whenever I was asked to sort of either put on a demo or a load test or a POC, a pilot, in other words, for a customer, it was actually just really expensive to do. And the core challenge was to sort of emulate a customer workload for some kind of a project. And I had realized that the complicated part of all of this was actually getting the data to look right and to mimic what the customer was actually trying to achieve in the real world. I had noticed this in all kinds of situations, but particularly in streaming, I had noticed it's pretty hard because the source of these data streams, they're not sort of just like files that sit out on S3 or something like that. They're actively generated, and so it was always kind of complicated to put together. And so I started ShadowTraffic, which essentially amounts to a Docker container that you can feed in a JSON API that allows you to describe the shape, the structure, the characteristics of your data, and then it sort of packages up um, producers directly to these various backends: Kafka, Postgres, S3, a few others. and generates data that looks right, behaves according to what you would want to see in the real world. You don't have to write any code. You really just speak in this high level JSON specification.
Good. So tell me that. So this 10K that POC, that means you have something that you need to get off the ground pretty quickly. You need to show, is it even viable, and that's what that 10K problem is.
Yeah, it's really just a name to sort of anchor on the problem. So maybe to use the tablet a little bit more, you have systems like S3, you have uh, you have Kafka, you have Postgres. Your objective is to sort of take what the customer is doing and it sort of without actually seeing their data set really replicate into these various systems. And so just to maybe step through these various use cases, imagine that you wanted to build a demo for a conference. Well, you ask yourself who's out there in the conference audience. Maybe you have people from retail companies, you have people from insurance companies. You want to put on a demo that's actually pretty similar to what it is that they do day to day, but you don't have access to their data. And so you need to build a generator that looks something like these various domains. Another example, maybe you're an infrastructure company that's trying to close, I don't know, maybe you're trying to close like Walmart or Nordstrom or something. And these larger companies, they're not just going to bring their data to your analytics platform, your database platform, or whatever. There's a bit of security going on. There's a bit of trust. It takes time to move data from these different places. And so, what's the challenge of someone who's on the sales side at the infrastructure company? Well, you want to show some value, and if only you knew kind of the shape of their data, some characteristics about it, you can build them a nice pilot, a nice POC for them to sort of approximate what it is that they're doing. Maybe a third example, you're a backend engineer. You know that company Acme is having problems. They're your biggest account. They have the most volume of data. They have kind of the gnarliest schema. If you knew roughly again what it was that they're doing with their data and their schema, you want to quickly replicate that in your system. And so my objective was to make a product that can help all these various personas replicate what's going on in the real world onto your system really quickly. And so you don't have to kind of wait for everything to sort of come into order. I don't
Okay.
know if all that made sense, but I'm sort of
Oh,
unpacking kind of the various layers of this.
it definitely makes sense. So you talked about doing a demo right here. There's a funny story. I was doing a conference with Google, and we were doing a demo of Cloud Data Flow, their processing engine. They said, "Do you think a 1,000 node cluster will be enough to show scale here?" And I kind of laugh because normally these demos, as you rightly point out, it's maybe one node, maybe just a 3 node cluster. They're not looking for load testing. They'll do that later on. What they're looking for is this early fit of, does this look like my data that's coming here that we can land here and show a viability of this infrastructure?
Yeah, that's right. And I kind of picked the $10,000 demo problem as a cute, memorable title. But as you say, the kind of the scope of demo, it's different. It could be this small thing that you need to do quickly. It could be this big thing that's going to take a lot of time to show the actual stress test with 1,000 nodes. And I had just noticed the same problem showing up everywhere. There were all these little projects to generate load. No one was really using them. And particularly in streaming, as I said, it was just really gnarly to do some of these things. And maybe to give you really one quick example, imagine that you have, say, like a Flink cluster that's processing two streams of data that are coming in. If you're doing a join across those data sets, how do you know that Flink is going to perform really well when you throw a lot of volume at it? Well, you would need to generate two streams that actually have matching keys in the right window
Yep.
of time to be able to stress Flink in that way. And that's not easy to do. I mean, it's not impossible, of course, but you don't probably have the tools at your disposal to do that. And that was kind of like another gap that I wanted to fill.
So I guess the point that I would make for people watching this is that demos, sometimes people, maybe they're software engineers that, or they're usually it was the sales engineer having to write these demos, but these demos are the make or break of a deal. It's really key. I've always, as I've worked with various startups, I've always tell them, have an incredible demo and put a lot of effort into these demos, because that is what sets you apart. And you're right, that initial data, is important. In fact, I did a project. It's up on my GitHub too. Of how do you get a real time join? Well, you have to do single producer that goes into two different topics. You could do a real time join that way. It can be difficult. It can be painful, but you have to do it.
Yeah. It's exactly what you're saying too. I think there's kind of a lesson in there that the more you wow the customer in the very first meeting, the more likely that that deal is going to have momentum and progress quickly. And that's something that like engineers can take away. You can build empathy and say like, how do I make people really say, "Oh my God, wow," the first time that they see it? And you got to get into their brain to figure out what's important to them. And when you do it, it's fun. It's almost like you're a magician that you did this trick and you understood a person almost more than they understood themselves.
Oh. So yeah, that's exactly why you would need a shadow traffic. So somebody might be sitting there thinking, and in fact, I've written one. Maybe somebody watching this has written a process to put some data into Kafka. Why is this a more involved thing than just let me bang that out in a day?
Yeah. So for streams, as I said, the source of these things, they tend not to just sort of be like a set of files that you chuck in. So like to back up, for instance, for a batch processor, if you wanted to feed something into Spark, it sort of just looks at the file system and says, what is the set of files for me to process? It doesn't really matter when those files showed up. For the most part, it doesn't matter their size or their composition. It just sort of treats them all as a whole, as you kind of see in the data lake space. The whole point of these abstractions, like Iceberg, is to sort of make that really easy. But for streams, it's different. You have these individual events showing up. They have different schemas. They have
Would you
different
mind
compositions.
diagramming this out so that it's helpful for people to visualize? So go to whiteboard
Oh,
2.
yeah, terribly sorry. How do I? A procedural question. How do I erase what's here so I can use the rest of the
No,
screen?
go to whiteboard 2. Go
Whiteboard.
press
Oh,
press
there we
D.
go.
Yeah.
I'm learning really well. Okay, great. Yeah, so you have systems like Spark, and their whole point is to sort of work across a file system or a virtual file system or an object store. There we go. And for the most part, it doesn't really matter kind of what these files look like or when they have showed up. Spark is really trying to take sort of a snapshot across all these pieces of data, process them all at once, and maybe this is your input. And the goal is to sort of come up with this output data set. There's various ways of doing this depending on how you're doing it, but it's just sort of this like functional one thing to next thing. With something like maybe Flink and Kafka, you're feeding in all of these individual streams. You're feeding in all these individual streams, and things like time matter. So to give a little bit more color, so for the instance of doing a streaming join, if maybe this is like customers, and this is orders. If your order shows up with maybe say this is your order event, and maybe the customer ID for that order is maybe customer ID 42. If as you're trying to test this thing, customer ID 42 doesn't show up until significantly far back in the stream, your join is going to miss, and that none of that is going to work. Um, Maybe to give some non-functional examples of that as well. Imagine that you wanted to test what will happen if there's a hot partition, and so to explain if people don't know what that means, imagine you have maybe a 6 shard data set, and the majority of your traffic is going to shard 1. That can actually stress a lot of infrastructure out, and you don't really know what's going to happen until you test that. So that's another example where testing these streaming systems is a little bit more complicated than just generating a one-time data set and feeding it in over and over.
Yeah. Yeah, actually your talk about this whole customer and orders reminds me of the first thing that I did for Confluent. Uh, I wrote their demo for their booth for Strata, and I was mimicking customer data, order data, and Spotify data, basically
Yeah.
playback data.
What
And
did you find challenging about that?
uh, it was kind of a pain to make sure everything matched up, but it was also I was putting in lat longs for places. So part of the demo was to be able to say, okay, here's a lat long of where that play is happening, and we're in real time viewing where that place was.
Yeah.
But if you have the world, or if you have the world and you're playing and there's out in the ocean, yeah, that doesn't work. So you had actually have to make sure you had valid lat longs, and you had to make sure you had valid keys to do the joins. Otherwise, when you're in front of somebody trying to do a demo, you can't just say, "Oh, sorry, my demo doesn't work." They think, "Sorry, your technology doesn't work," rather than you messed up on the demo.
And it's a perfect example. And actually, by the time this is announced, I'll have shipped the ability to generate real geolocation data, which is kind of another face of what we're talking about. I've been talking about the specifics of streaming and why that's complicated. You're talking about something even more broad, which is that you just need good data, which is a challenge all on its own. Like, where are you going to get public data sets that show you real locations in a particular country? I did that because I only do that. Like, these are the problems that I focus on. Another example that came to mind as you're speaking is a lot of these event streaming systems, they essentially follow state machines. So, like, to give an example, imagine you're building maybe a mortgage application where you
Well,
start
how
and
about let's
you're
let's go to 3 and you draw that out.
oh, good idea. Um, oh, I've lost. There it is. Great. Yeah, imagine you're building this home loan application and your initial state is you've opened up a loan. So um, just B for begin, you're beginning the application, and then maybe the next phase is your application has been sort of like initially received, and they do like a basic background check on you. Maybe they'll run through some various checks, and your application will um, either be approved or denied. This is something really simple, but essentially what I'm getting at is that in a lot of these event-driven systems, there's a sequence of things that needs to happen. A happens, then B happens, then C happens. Maybe it's more complicated. Maybe you have loops in the machine. Maybe you have states that kind of terminate and go off into just totally discarded. This is really common. And again, how would you write a generator for this? I've been focusing on this specific problem uh, um, pretty single-mindedly. All of my customers who use ShadowTraffic have variations of this state machine problem. And to help, there's a state machine generator inside ShadowTraffic that makes it easy to express states and transitions and the likelihood that different things are going to happen. And without that, I've seen the equivalent code that people write. You write your own state machine and you manage how transitions happen and when you make the transition and what happens when it goes to nowhere, and you clean up your extra state. And it's just complicated. And it's a lot better if there's actually this set of higher level primitives where you can just sort of say, these are my states, these are my transitions, this is what happens when we're on this state. And then the load is just generated on your behalf. And as I said, particularly pernicious for any time you're in streaming, just because the events are coming in at different times and different topics, and it's a lot harder.
No, that doing a state machine like that is pretty difficult, and I bet if you were to do a demo of a state machine to a bank or something like that, it would blow them away, because this is a difficult demo. This is a more, but it also mimics the domain much better.
Exactly. And what I said was kind of a complicated example, like a home loan application. But here's an even simpler application where it comes up all the time. Imagine you want to generate CDC data with Postgres. I know lots of people who want to test out Debezium. How do you do that? You actually have to generate some rows, and then at the same time generate some updates and some deletes, and you have to keep track of which rows are currently in Postgres so that you don't send a wrong operation. It's a state machine. You have basically kind of a row goes from um,
Oh, I was
this
starting to
insert
draw
state.
it out, but
Oh, go
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 ahead.
for it. Go for it.
So you
Yeah,
got your,
yeah.
so I should have
You
put
you
shadow traffic.
Yeah. So we have ShadowTraffic would send data into Postgres, and what it's basically doing is keeping track of this little state machine. For each row, you'd start out on the insert state, and then you would transition to an update state, and then maybe you go to a delete state. But it's more interesting. You can update multiple times. You can go from insert to delete, and you want to run many of these at the same time. And ShadowTraffic is basically packed with primitives to say, take a state machine and then fork it. So run it many different times with different entities. So you can have 100,000 different rows that are inserting, updating, and deleting, and you can control the interval with these things are happening. Um, Complicated to write on your own, not impossible. I don't feel like I've done something that nobody else can do, but Would you want to do it? Probably not.
No, if you're doing a demo, probably not unless you were to do this demo pretty consistently. Now, as you were talking, one thing I thought of or wondered, is this only for demos, or are people using this for load testing or acceptance testing?
I've surprised myself. I started with this idea of the $10,000 demo problem because it's, as I said, it's memorable. It kind of goes at the problem that I think is important, which is broadly simulating customer load. Actual demos, most people don't use it for this. I mean, they'll use it sometimes, but it's not the reason that I get customers. I get customers because I sell to field engineering teams who are putting on polished pilots for customers. They really need to replicate what's going on. I have customers because I sell to engineering teams for exactly what you said, because they're doing load testing and they're doing stress testing. And so it's been funny. It's sort of like I invalidated my initial hypothesis that simple demos, people who are doing that would pay for this. And it's true that people who do demos want this, but they're not going to pay a lot of money for it, and that's fine. But I have discovered where the actual, customer footprint is, and yeah, it's a funny path to go down. You don't always end up where you think you're going to end up.
Well, actually, as soon as you started talking about people didn't want to do the demo, that was my exact thought is that there's a pricing issue, and you'd probably have to do a dual pricing strategy of having one for demos and having one for a more in tune, a more in depth load testing. Have you experimented with that already?
Yeah, I've done a very dumb version of that, which is that whenever somebody wants to use it for a demo, I just give it away to them for free because the cost to me is so low. I get a happy user. They don't worry about price. They're kind of do my marketing for me, where they use the tool and they love it. And if this is successful, I'll figure out that sort of lower value pricing later, or maybe it's usage based and it costs you $50 to use it really quick or whatever. Whereas when I sell to these enterprises to help them close large deals, those prices are significantly higher because the effort's higher, the reward's higher, the value's higher, and yeah, so I have a pretty dumb hack, which is to just give it away for free.
Okay, that's a good loss leader. Yeah, you, you probably know a loss leader. For those who don't know, is sometimes if you go to Walmart or whatever retail store, there'll be something in the very front that is actually going to lose them money, but they think overall, if they draw you in and get you to spend and go through the register, you'll buy some other things that will along the way not just offset that loss, but make them money. That's called a loss leader.
Yeah, it's my Costco $1.50 hot dog and soda. I think it's been the same price for what is it, like 40 years or something. It's just
Yes.
absurd, but it keeps me going back to Costco.
Yeah. And you'll inevitably you will go and buy something while you're there at Costco. And yeah, it works well. And so you're completely right. People get some miles on it. People, oh, shadow traffic. What's that? In fact, I think the first post I saw was on LinkedIn of somebody thanking you. I think it was Robin thanking you for using it during their conference talk. So you have this
Yeah,
viral effect of people using it.
yeah, and while we're on the whiteboard, I mean, on this topic, I think when people wonder how do you get your product out there, you have to remember it's a people game. And the best description I've seen has been by Ryan Holiday, who kind of described that the market out there is sort of like a graph, and every person is a node. And some nodes are bigger. They're the people who are kind of the influencers, and they have more reach. And some people they don't have as much reach. They're just a node or two sitting out here. And the idea is if you want to make your product really popular, it makes sense to go target these nodes that have a lot of connections, because they're the people who are taste setters. They're the one who are influencing people. And so yeah, when you sort of talk about like how do you get a viral effect? How do you get people out there? You want to find the people who are well connected, and just generate word of mouth that way. Because if you think about it from like an algorithmic perspective, it's the most efficient way to traverse your way through the graph, and it's also kind of the most socially natural way.
Yeah, the big question is, does shadow traffic support graph?
Technically not yet, but yeah, maybe someday the product marketing strategy and the technical strategy will converge.
I could just imagine trying to model a graph and do that kind of randomly. That might be difficult, but it would be interesting. Or do you do text generation as well?
Mostly it comes in the form of sort of structured data. And so I started with Kafka because that's the world that I know. And so I would generate events to Kafka. Over time, I broadened that to Postgres was like a very natural addition. Almost everyone who uses Kafka uses Postgres schema and structured. So it's sort of like it was like event data where it was well formed. I've been branching out to say S3 now, where you could just put whatever you want and you could put some bytes. And so far, I've kind of stuck with this model that you're sort of generating streams of events, and it doesn't matter what the backend is as long as it can accept writes asynchronously, and you could just put them somewhere. That's just the model that seems to have worked. Interestingly, I get a lot of people asking about like unstructured text and things you can feed into LLMs, and there's probably room for a company out there. I don't know if that's going to be me, but lots of room in that space to play.
Yeah, I think that yeah, that was what I originally thought of. I mean, what prompt would you put in? Give me keep giving me things that a random user on from Walmart would say in a text. I don't know. It could be
I
interesting,
think
but the value of that actual data I don't think would be that huge for a demo or even load testing.
it's a bit of a different use case, and I am a little skeptical of it. I don't know what my opinion is on it yet, but basically, lots of people out there who are using LLMs have to train their LLM on many different examples of something that they want to see in the world. So, for example, maybe you're a company that you're using an LLM to ingest um, Slack conversations to like look for something that's important. I don't know, dumb example, but to do that, you actually need a lot of Slack activity, and you may not have it. And so the hypothesis is, can you synthesize those Slack conversations in such a way that you could train your LLM with it? And I don't know what the answer is, but a lot of people are wondering about that. And maybe the answer will be something different than what I think, but it's a possibility.
Yeah, that could be interesting. So other than state machines and sort of probably the normal sort of primitives that we're used to, are there any other primitives that are built in that might surprise us for shadow traffic?
Yeah, there's a couple. How do I make a new board?
I
Oh, I
go to
think I figured it out.
go to four.
There we go. Yeah, one of the things that I added over time, and I just tend to add things as customers ask for them because it's just the most natural, is the ability to sort of distort a stream. So, say you've got your Kafka cluster here, and maybe you're doing some processing with Kafka streams or a Flink off the side. One of the things that you'll probably want to do is figure out how resilient are those systems in the face of problems. Well, what kind of problems? You have all of your events. Maybe for a random event, some probability of the time, you want to delay its execution or delay its its reception. And so as the events are moving through, you sort of take an event, you pluck it out, and you say, actually, no, you're going to wait 200 milliseconds before you make your way into the stream. Or another one, you might take an event and say, um, I want to repeat that event multiple times, and so pretend that there was a network hiccup, and we're now going to duplicate that event a couple different times. There are primitives in all these stream processors that are meant to handle latent data and repeated data, or even altogether dropped data. Maybe I just want to totally kill that event and say, nope, you didn't make your way there. Something went wrong. There's primitives inside of ShadowTraffic to say, here's my specification of data that I want to generate, and then apply this set of chaos controls over it where I want to tune all these things and just start dropping data, delaying it. You could even change the schema and say, this value is going to go out of range or this data type is going to get warped. And they end up being very good ways to stress test your application. Are they able to handle these network errors or these upstream application faults? And so they've been very fun to observe and see what people are doing with them.
As an aside to what you just said, those of you who are testing your streaming systems, if you aren't doing these sorts of tests, you are setting yourself up for failure. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. You will get delayed data, you will get repeated data. Your application needs to handle that, or you need to have set up Kafka in this case to deal with that correctly. Otherwise, your app will go crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one thing to sort of read the documentation and say, oh, turn on this configuration and then like run this unit test to see whether this worked. It's another to actually run at your normal production system and see what happens. Because as you said, it's eventually going to happen. And would you rather deal with it now or would you rather deal with it when your biggest accounts are like, what the heck, man? Why is all of our stuff broken? And, why is your service down? And it's just kind of an obvious choice.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other interesting ones?
I think those are probably the main ones. I think my general strategy has been um, to sort of create sort of a wider set of generators. Like in the beginning, when people were looking at this problem, there are these popular libraries out there like Java Faker, which lets you make credit cards and phone numbers. I realized the opportunity was to go beyond that, to generate many different kinds of scalars, relationships across the data sets that we talked about, state machines, these chaos transitions. There's a whole bunch of them. But if you sort of look at what my roadmap is, it's just adding these kinds of things. Like we talked about geolocation data. You know, you need that kind of realistic data once in a while. It would be sort of a pain to build into these libraries, but for a product, it's actually quite tenable where you're just building around this idea of what more data do you need and what are the relationships between different data sets that you could set up.
It's interesting. Did you do population modeling in that so that LA, for example, has far more than Billings, Montana?
Technically, yeah. I mean, I did this interesting strategy where I went on a hunt for public domain data sets. I downloaded them. I wrote the code to clean them up, index them, query, cache them. And so I have a demo coming out tomorrow that actually shows voting in like an Ohio 2004 election, something very non-controversial. And what you see is exactly what you say. It's casting votes all around the state at the same time. And you see the cities fill in a lot faster because the population is more dense around Cleveland and Columbus, and it's pretty cool to see the heat map light up. And I didn't intend that. I realized that after I filmed it, that oh right, because the data set is like real, you see urban populations fill in much faster than rural populations, and so it was a fun post hoc discovery.
Oh, good. And okay, so you've talked about your roadmap. What do you what's interesting on the roadmap coming up?
Yeah, that's a good question. As I said, I'm mostly customer driven. I would say probably the most exciting thing I've been hacking on is kind of up leveling the product. So to uh, to make another page here, what I've built so far, as I said, I have ShadowTraffic, which is this Docker container, and you write some JSON, you feed it into ShadowTraffic. The JSON says make the data look like this, and then the point is to go and take your specification, create like a smart Kafka producer that you never see, and send the data to Kafka. This is fine for many use cases where you don't have the data yet. You're supposing what somebody might want. It doesn't exist yet. But there's an other interesting use case where the data already exists. It's in Kafka. And actually, you just want to make more data like it, which is pretty common in engineering. You've got this data set in your production, and you're like, well, man, what happens if we have 10 times that amount of data? It's actually not a great idea to just go replay it at 10x because you're really just replicating the same thing over and over. What you want is like 10 times the mixture. And so what I've been working on is kind of an extension to ShadowTraffic that can introspect into Kafka and look at what data is already there, and then figure out what is the right JSON configuration um, to create more data like that. And that way you don't have to really program anything. It just sort of goes and does reservoir sampling. It looks at the data types. It looks at the composition of data. It kind of does histograms to figure out how frequently are certain values coming in, and sort of writes the JSON for you. This isn't something you want to use for every use case, of course, but for the situations where your data is already there, it's useful. And it's been a fun problem because you get to do all these algorithms around reservoir sampling and streaming and stuff, but also because it involves LLMs. And if you think about when you just sort of look at a raw Kafka schema and you say, well, what is this data? They're all strings. Well, what kind of strings? Are they phone numbers? Are they social security numbers? Are they country codes? And LLM is actually really well suited for this. And so I've been kind of leveraging Olama to do some of this, where ShadowTraffic will selectively take out some data, feed it to a local Olama server, and then use something like Mistral to figure out what do these words actually mean and generate the right configuration for you.
As an aside, Olama is a local, I guess, Chat GPT that you don't have to call into Chat GPT with that data, and Mistral is a an open source AI LLM
Yeah.
implementation.
That's right.
One I found interesting. Yes, that yeah, there are some. I'm surprised more people aren't doing more with Olama for that sort of thing of looking at data, and uh, I'm doing a uh, uh, a survey right now, actually asking that question. Are people only thinking that they're going to use in data engineering an LLM for code generation? And I think we're actually missing out on this part far more than I think we should be.
Yeah, I came to it pretty late. So when I, knew I wanted to work on this feature, I call it predict. I had thought, well, I'll use GPT-4, and that was fine for most of my customers. But for some of them, they didn't want to pay OpenAI. They couldn't send their data off to another vendor. Pretty common right now, actually. And so I started to look at local models. Llama 2 seemed like the one that was pretty advanced at the time I had started looking, and I played with it, and there were just things that were frustrating about it. I couldn't get to do what I wanted, and I started to look, and I was like, "Well, how do I use any of these other models? I don't. I'm completely new to the AI world. I don't know how any of this stuff works. It seems like you download files, and then you need bindings to it, and I'm on the JVM, so that's weird." And then eventually, I realized this Olama thing I had been hearing about is just it's a REST server, so it downloads these files for you and then provides an HTTP interface so that your programming language doesn't need to know how to talk to the model, and then you just speak request response. And my mind was just opened. It was like, oh my god, this is so easy. Why didn't I just do this in the first place? Because then you get access to this huge range of models. You don't need to know how they work. You just have to obey the standard interface, and I think it's magic. The only thing that we need is for the local models to get significantly better, because my what I found is that like even Mistral, one of the better open source models out there, is just still so far behind Gemini and GPT, and this will get really exciting when the models become very capable on your own laptop.
Yes, that will be when it gets really interesting. And I've always said the competition is good, and I think that the competition between all these open source models as well as the closed source models, it's I was actually worried probably 6 months ago, a year ago, that OpenAI was just going to come away with everything, and we would have this monopoly basically. And what's actually created is this really incredible playing field of everybody kind of throwing in their model and then taking other models and mixing them. It's been interesting.
Yeah, I could absolutely see the future for this, and I felt the same way where it was like I wanted to build something really cool, and it seemed like the only way I could possibly do that was to pay OpenAI, however much money for the API calls, but I wanted some freedom as the consumer, so it's nice to see it coming.
Well, good. And so we talking more about the technology stack. It's written in Java. Did I understand that right?
It's written in Clojure, runs on the JVM, cross compiles into Clojure script. Actually, this is like one of the cool Easter eggs about the product is if you go on the website, you'll see a little terminal emulation of what it's like when ShadowTraffic runs. It's generating some data. That's the real product. I actually got it to cross compile into JavaScript, and I loaded up in the browser in a very like minified form. And so yeah, it runs in Clojure, JVM, and JavaScript.
Oh, nice. Back to those closure roots, but yeah,
I've been
not as
very
much closure
productive
out
in it. It's
there.
just yeah, it's I don't think it's a dying community. It's not like an expanding community, but I remain very productive in it, and who knows where it'll eventually go. But I'm happy for now.
Okay. Do you have anything else that you want to talk about on shadow traffic that I didn't that I missed?
I think that covers it. It's like we've been talking about. It's kind of my current capstone in my career. I really wanted to sort of push myself. What's sort of interesting about it from a non-tech perspective is that it's a solo bootstrapped company. So I don't have any other founders. I haven't taken any investment. I just really wanted to see whether you can make like a business the old-fashioned way. And it seemed to me that this was a good test of kind of my skills so far. Had I been fooling myself my whole career? Was it just getting lucky? Uh, I obviously there's still a lot to grow, but I feel like the answer is no. I've learned some things, and it's cool to see the effort pay off into something real.
Well, that was one of my early questions. Even having written these as GitHub projects, is this a business? Is this a hobby? Is this what do you think you're expecting it to grow to?
Yeah, business. I mean, I'm betting my opportunity cost on this. So I looked at my Confluent salary. I looked at how much I'm making right now, and I have quite a ways to go to pull them up because I'm 7 months in, first couple customers. But yeah, this is business. I really want to see whether I can make a living off this. I don't know whether I'll be able to achieve like my big tech salary. Maybe if I'm really lucky and I work really hard at it. But yeah, I want to see whether it's possible for one person to make a product and not take venture capital funding and do really well at it.
Well, I'm rooting for you. So as you uh, one of the things that we talked about early on was how many people from Confluent who've left and have started a company. Why do you think that is? I was comparing it to Cloudera, and I don't think as many people left and started companies as there was at Cloudera, or in comparison to Cloudera. Why do you think that is?
That's a good question. I think part of it is probably the talent composition of Confluent. I was lucky to work there. There were a lot of very talented people that I enjoyed being with them, and they were clearly smart and wanted to do hard things. And that was kind of the reason to join the company in the early days. It was like this cutting edge thing. And so I do think it's in the DNA of the people that Confluent tended to recruit. And then I would say the other thing is sort of the company culture. I mean, even in the later days where the trappings of a large company have set in, like the Concur type things, where there's just more overhead. Um, I'd say like the CEO Jay has a very entrepreneurial spirit and is just very this was a very startup attitude about him. I mean, I'd worked with him on some projects, even in the later stages of the company. He always sort of attacked it from the first principles of like, okay, if we have nothing, how do we grow this into something? Which is very startup mentality. And so I do think kind of the management team's um, philosophy and just personality has kind of actually influenced people to do that. And so it's been a nice outcome.
You mentioned that Confluent was kind of a finishing school for you. What was that? Probably the one thing that you found the most interesting, and the most, oh wow, I would have never thought that, in that finishing part of learning how to be an entrepreneur.
It's a good question. I think I didn't really have a great understanding of how a big company operated until I spent many years at Confluent. I spent 5 years there. I had worked at Viasat, which was a public company, but it was only for something like maybe a year and a half or 2 years or something like that. And I was kind of a low level engineer. And so I didn't really see how do big companies make decisions, along what timelines, what are the human dynamics of decision makers, how do you get people on the same page. And so it was sort of building empathy for how does a big company run, which is very important for me right now because I sell B2B enterprise software. And those companies have to go through the same motions. I have to understand what's their decision making process. How do people get along? And I think unless I had been part of that, I would have just felt like, oh, this is so alien to me. Why are they so slow? I don't understand any of this. I'd probably get a little bit bitter. But now it's helped me just to, yeah, build empathy and perspective and just realize, what's part of the game.
Okay. What advice would you give to aspiring programmers to get into entrepreneurship?
Try something small. I think there's this maybe luring narrative that you kind of have to like just go all in and take a massive risk. And even with the stuff that we talked about, I mean, we hit the high level points, but like I waded into this. I started out with a job. I did an open source project that I worked on at night. I tried to build some credibility. I did some small consulting for myself before I had a co-founder. It was just little steps getting there. And so try to find little ways to take bets and build traction on small problems. See if you like it. You don't need to go risk everything. That'll give you a little sandbox to play in, and you can grow the walls of that sandbox however you feel like it's working out for you or not.
One of the business books I read called it a difference between a cannon shot and a pot shot, or a rifle shot. If you're imagining yourself as a big ship, you don't want to have to turn the ship in order to take a cannon shot. What you want to do is have a gun where somebody just turns around and they take that pot shot at it. And then if you say, "Oh, wow, we better take that," then you can move the ship around, take that cannon shot, and go from there.
I think that's great advice for a career. You want to be able to be nimble and figure out what skills do you want to add and not have to like throw it all away to go figure out whether that was the right move or not.
Oh, very good. Well, Michael, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for sharing so openly, and I wish you best of luck on Shadow Traffic.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jesse. Great conversation.